If aggressive classical chess appeals to you, then you might want to check out this opening. In this video, we're gonna talk about with you one of the common openings that you can do usually with a white perspective, which stands for Scotch Gambit. So the Scotch Gambit usually happens after you play the Scotch game, but the main difference between a Scotch Gambit and a Scotch game, in the Scotch game we usually accept this pawn on d4 with our knight, but in the Scotch Gambit we sacrifice our pawn and get this light square bishop on a c4. And as you can see, once we develop this light square bishop, it got this active diagonal with the aim at f7 square. And once we played here bishop c4 move, black has a 4 ways that he can go for, and this is actually one of the common moves that black can go after bishop c4. The main line in this variation stands for knight f6, but before looking for it, let's consider other variations. Let's start first with the knight a5. So knight a5, as you can see, black is coming to attack our bishop. And here, most people think that probably white gonna retreat the bishop because that looks very natural. But as I said in the beginning of the video, it's one of the aggressive openings because you're gonna use this light square bishop with the aim on f7 square immediately with the check. So we sacrifice our bishop, king takes, knight e5, and queen takes d4. And in this position already you can see what's going on. Like, we gave up the pawn at the beginning, we gave up the bishop, but in exchange we got the important thing. Black lost the king safety. And right now, all the effort of white gonna attack this king no matter what. Knight 6, we give the check. King f6, that's the only move. Otherwise, king e7 will lead to queen f7 check, and king will gonna travel here throughout the board, and at the end it will get checkmated by the pawn, like this way. And if we go back after queen d5 check, so king e7, king f6, it's actually both of the moves already losing for the black, because in both cases black is gonna get checkmated very soon. So in the king f6 it's the same, we go with the queen f7 check, king takes, bishop gives a check, and as you can see that in this position we have just queen c4 mate on the board, and black king got checkmated like this way. So as you can see, knight a5, immediately we have the bishop f7 check, which gives us the opportunity to attack the king as soon as possible. What might be other options of the black in this situation? Another natural move that most people can go for would be it's a bishop c5. And the reason behind this move is very clear. Black is just trying to save his extra pawn on the board. But white really don't care about this extra pawn. His main target is this f7 weakness. So we go with the knight g5 to add another pressure. But black keeps defending with the knight. But we will not stop putting the pressure, and knight e5. And in this situation, what's happening is that like we keep attacking, black is keep defending. And the situation is like that, like you start the threat, you keep adding the pressure, but it's being defended really well. All right, if the plan A is not working, let's go with the plan B. So f7, we cannot do nothing, there are so many defenders. And here we have very attractive move that we can do with the white. It is knight e6. At first sight, it just looks like a normal sacrifice, which means we are making discard attack. So black is kind of gonna take the knight, and we take the knight with our queen, and it looks kind of fair exchange, like you gave the knight and got back the knight. But here you're gonna understand what's actually the point behind this sacrifice. We take the knight, and that was the tempo. So black needs to spend here time to save his bishop, and once he save it, and here's the main idea, that you can capture this knight, and your queen got the important diagonal. And once he captures the knight, black has no option, like taking the bishop is not an option, of course, because he is going to lose the rook in this situation. But otherwise, even a black plays here something differently. It's so clear white has a clearly winning position on the board. So far we saw that when the black played knight f5 and the bishop got to c5, all our focus and concentration was this on f7 square. And now let's take a look at another interesting option of the black, which giving the check with the b4 immediately with the bishop. Well, of course, black is also making his development with the tempo. Black here blockades this check with the pawn. Black takes back. And after black takes back, white one more time doesn't care about the pawn, because the main idea and the main target in this current situation is to attack this Mr. King on e8. So black takes and white takes back. So what we got in this position? Of course, we were down to one pawn, but now it's a 2 pawns. But there's enough compensation for it. We got 2 bishops on the board, which they are really on their maximum potential right now, controlling these whole diagonals. And at the same time, somehow this setup looks very similar to Danish Gambit, and some of the ideas even we can use from that Gambit as well. So we go with the bishop b2, with the threat attacking the g7. Black need to blockade it with the knight f6. And here's the next step. You made your opening, you made a very quick development, and it's time to start your attack as soon as possible. Otherwise, if you delay it, your compensation or your sacrifices will not be worthy. So we go the e5, immediately attacking the knight and starting the threat, which king hasn't castled yet. So we are starting the attack immediately. e5, knight g4, h3. Let's make another move with the tempo, and it's just sort of like a prophylaxis, but with the tempo. Knight h6. Well, alright, somehow we started the attack, but it needs to continue, right? We keep pushing forward this pawn. e6. Well, we are sacrificing the pawn one more time. We actually like the pawns, but still, after e6, the main goal of this move is just to open up this dark squared bishop and to attack on the g7. And black here has no time trying to defend this g7 pawn, otherwise his f7, another weakness being created in this position. We're gonna just take the pawn, knight takes, bishop takes, king takes, queen comes to check, king goes back, and knight g5. One more time, that like a special, and our favorite square, f7, is really the main weakness for black in the current situation, and of course it's a main target of white at the same time. So once we go here e6, all the decisions of black taking the pawn will lead to bishop g7, or taking the pawn like this way, well, one more time will lead to bishop g7. And you might think, oh, okay, so I push the pawn e6, is that means there's no way black gonna do anything about it? Well, black only has one normal option, but still that is still better for white, and this would be castling. And just by castling, you can see black is just hitting 2 shots. He's adding the defender on f7 and at the same time on the g7 as well. We're gonna take the pawn, knight takes, and queen goes to d5. And in this position, as I'm saying, it's not we have a crazy advantage, but what we have is here the active development and of course the more space than the black. And finally, we left the last main variation of this Scotch Gambit. It's when the black knight goes to f6. Knight f6 is being played, of course, to develop the knight, but at the same time with a threat on our e4 pawn. But again, here we're gonna use a little bit of mindset. The best defense is counterattack. So our pawn is under attack, but one more time we don't really care about this pawn, and gonna play this sort of tricky move, castling. And by castling, we are just saying to our opponent, hey, it's just a free pawn, you can go for it and be up 2 pawns on the board. But there's a really great advice in chess that you should not try to win the pawn if your development hasn't finished yet. But let's just see. Knight e4. This is a very natural move because it's hanging pawn, and most people think that you blundered by castling the pawn. So when the black takes the pawn on e4, you go with the rook e1. Well, not some sort of like a dangerous threat for the black, but still it's a pin. And here black can play f5, or black can go with a d5. So both of the moves will help the black to defend the knight. If f5, we're gonna go with the bishop g5 move. So black cannot take because of it's a pin, and queen also cannot take because our bishop is guarded by the knight. So knight e7, black tries to blockade. We kind of right now force this e4 knight to take our bishop, and that's the main point why we forcing the knight to take our bishop, to increase the pressure over this f7 square. And right now we are threatening this f7 checkmate. Let's just say if black tries to kick out the knight by playing h6, we have just this sort of beautiful mate on the f7 square with the help of the knight and the bishop. And let's go back to the situation. How about d5? If d5, we have this again very strong move, bishop d5. Yeah, it's a lot of full of Scotch Gambit. It's full of sacrifices, attractive chess, and at the same time aggressive. We sack the bishop, but we will also take it back after one move with the move this knight c3. So in this knight c3, once we play knight c3 move, since both of the d and e files are being pinned, that black has no choice of taking the knight, because if he cannot take the knight, king is pinned, and if it takes to the pawn on the d5, queen is hanging. And here black need to try to figure out another option. Queen d8 could be the most natural move here to play with the black. We go with the rook e4 check, bishop e7, knight takes, castles, and bishop f4. Well, what we got in this current situation: active development, which means the placement of the white piece are just literally here well placed. I mean, it's just they're ready for the middle game part. And at the same time, since they're well placed, it gives us the opportunity to control over more squares. That means the more space on the board. And here we can say it's around plus 0.7 position, slightly better position for the black, and I think it's very enjoyable to continue the rest of the game with the white perspective.